Hello and welcome to another video of my tutorial series, and in this video I'd like to explain you how you can achieve some really good looking and photorealistic results in Realtime with VRED 2022 with the recently introduced texture-based light mapping. And I will explain you in that scene how my pipeline looks like to get the light and the shadows baked into such a scene. And as you can see, we have basically planar objects, and what that scene makes looking so good is really the light and the details in the shadow. So when I switch over to the pre-computed illumination rendering, you can see just the baked light in here. And all these fine little details of the shadows make the scene looking really realistic at the end. So I have modeled most of the objects in Fusion 360. Some of them are done in Blender, and I have modeled that mirror I want to place in my scene, and I will explain on that example how my pipeline looks like. So that mirror is assembled in a bigger scene, so you can see I have basically half of the house in Fusion 360, and that mirror is placed in the sleeping room. And actually I want to keep the position because in real it's also there. Yeah, of course I could also only export that mirror, but I'd like to keep that position, so I will export the whole scene from Fusion 360 and then delete the things that are not necessary. So as a format, I usually choose images or step. That doesn't really matter. I save that in my folder. Yes, I will overwrite that. We'll give it the same name and export that file. So back in VRED, I'm selecting the root node and import that images file. And I think I will not stick with the default setting, so I only need a very low or coarse tessellation for it. So let's choose low, enable the stitching. I think all the rest is fine, and I don't need any references, and then press import. The nice thing with the texture-based light maps is that you can keep the geometry tessellation and the amount of triangles really low, because all the details are in the shadow or in the light map, and as this is a texture, the geometry quality doesn't really matter. Of course, I'm looking at smaller objects like here these knobs or the light switch have a little bit higher tessellation, but basically for everything that is planar, the walls or here the rack is very low tessellated. I will show you once the import is finished. Alright, so let's hide that for a second, and I turn on the wireframe, and here you can see that my tessellation is really low. So here, even for the door, I could save some triangles. Maybe I do that later by simply retessellating, because that's totally fine as it is a planar object. And of course I need a little bit more details for smaller objects or curved objects like this. So okay, as you have seen, I have the flat in here now twice. So let's make an isolate view on it, and here is my mirror. So that's the whole object. So I simply cut that by pressing Ctrl X. Then I can basically delete all of the rest, and in here is where I want to place that mirror back. So I have grouped that stuff already a little bit, so I have made one group for the whole sleeping room. So it's a little bit easier than later to choose or select objects for light baking and working with it by isolating it. So I paste my mirror in here. And you're wondering why that mirror is so bright while all the other objects look really good. And this is not because there are no materials assigned yet. This is because I'm using a very high ISO value in my camera. Because my flat is surrounded by, let's change it back to default 100. My flat is surrounded by the environment material, so by that skylight environment. So in VRED there's a material where you can actually set up your location and the time of the day, and I'm using that to get the right sun position at that time at the day. And for my whole baking process I'm using photon mapping, and all the light that is in my scene is basically coming from outside, from that dome, going through the windows and illuminating the rest of the house or the building or the rooms. And there is not much light left, and everything after it went through the windows, and everything all the light that is in here is basically an indirect light, except I think in the kids room. Yeah, okay, this is really the direct light, and all the rest and all the other rooms, also the sleeping room that is on the opposite side of the light, this is just basically a light coming through the window, so indirect light. And in real it's the same, but your eyes are adapting to the brightness of the environment, so it is brighter. Yeah. So yeah, and all the light we have in here is basically coming from that indirect light. So to get, and it's very dark in here, right? As my eyes are, or my camera is not adapting. So I could do two things. I could either higher the exposure of the environment before I start my baking process, which means when I go outside I have to change the ISO value as well to adapt to the super bright environment that is outside, or I bake it with the default values and adopt my camera when I'm inside. So, and this is actually what I did. So I changed that value back to 800, and this is nice looking and bright in here, and due to the fact that my mirror does not have any Lightmaps baked to it yet, it is super bright, but it will change as soon as we bake the light for it. So for the baking I'm using photon mapping. I can show you in the render settings, and a GPU ray tracer. So we'll make the window a little bit smaller to get some performance. And in my render settings, in the ray tracing quality settings, of course I choose full global illumination, and for my photon mapping I use just the indirection, so I'm not really interested in any caustics in here, with an amount of quite a lot of photons. And when I turn on my GPU ray tracer here, we can see the results in real time. Or not really in real time, but in ray tracing. All right, I also have the denoiser activated. So if I would turn that off, you can see you get a quite noisy image in here. So I can navigate in my scene, and of course this is all real time, right? So nearly real time. If I would turn on the anti-aliasing, my image quality gets better and better, but you can see it will take quite a lot until that noise is removed. And here is where the denoiser really helps. So if I turn that on to always, you can see it's in the first frame really blurry, but it very quickly is converging to a good result. I have two RTX 6000s in my computer, so two quite fast graphic cards helping to get a noise-free and good-looking still image. And this is what I want to bake into my scene, into Lightmaps, right? So important again before I start the baking process is that I turn on my photon tracing with the settings I'm happy with, and the denoising itself is done later in the baking process, so it does not really matter what you have here for the real-time rendering activated. Alright, but before you can see that the mirror looks quite good already. So there are no materials assigned yet, that's why it's not reflecting. But the next thing we do is prep the model a little bit, because I don't think we need all of the objects, so we can probably delete some screws in here. And the most important part I will go into now is the unwrapping, because I'm a big fan of super clean UVs before I start the baking process, so I can use the maximum available texture space for my Lightmaps later. Alright, so I usually do that in the vertex face normal rendering, because also then my camera tone mapping does not really matter. So check the object and to make an isolate view on that, and could probably also hide the environment dome, as this is a little bit annoying during the preparation process. So you can see it's split it up into 3 objects already: the mirror itself, the stand, and also the metal pieces in here. And I will go through the object step by step, delete stuff that I don't need, combine things that make sense to combine for me into one object or into one Lightmap later, and do the unwrapping. So yeah, let's start. So you could discuss, so do you really need that surface here at the side, or could you simply delete it because you don't see it? No, I would recommend to do these kind of preparation work, even if it's a little bit annoying, but it makes the following process a little bit easier: the unwrapping, because you can then, for example, open the UV editor and do a simple cut here, and it will unfold quite nice. So in the UV editor there are 2 UV sets you can work with: the material UVs and also the Lightmap UVs. And what we do first is doing our Lightmaps, and maybe I copy over some of the UVs to the material UV later to get the orientation of the texture right, because it will be a wood, and for me it is important that the structure of the wood is facing in the correct direction for all of these pieces. So in here there is actually a trick that makes working it a little bit smoother, because if I would select the object and press an unfold and layout, I get that object. It's probably fine too. But it is also possible, and maybe I show that later in another video, to copy the UVs from my NURBS object. You can see I still have access to all my surfaces. I can copy over these UVs to my Lightmap UV set and stitch them together instead of cutting it. So, but I think for that's it's totally fine. So I'm looking for an edge I can cut, and that is probably in an area where I don't see it at the end, and say cut edges and unfold and layout. And I think that's quite nice. So next object. I will probably speed up the video here, as it is a repeating thing, and jump in when it's getting more interesting. But basically I'm doing the same for the next object. Delete the faces I do not need, do an unfold and layout search for an edge I want to cut on. So just for my orientation, right, I did cut that object here, so I probably also choose the same edge for that object. And what I can see here is that's interesting. The tessellation, in my opinion, is still too high for that basically be a cube or planar object, right? So there are some triangles in here I don't really need. So before I go on, I will retessellate the whole mirror, which makes it easier because then later I have select only one edge instead of all of them here. So I select the object, go to the context menu in the scene graph, and then say surfaces, tessellate surfaces. So quality, I'm choosing, let's see, I can retessellate that at any time. So I'm choosing coarse, and important is that max chord length. This defines how long the triangles can be. So, and I don't know how big that mirror is, but I type in here 5000, which means a triangle maximum is then 5 meters. So due to the fact I have unwrapped one part already, of course I can redo that, but it would be nice if I can simply keep my already unwrapped UV for that one single part. I also enable the preserve UVs, and it tries to not delete or retessellate the already unwrapped objects. Alrighty, so as you can see, there is now one long single triangle and also only one edge I have to select. And when I go back to that one object we have unwrapped already, you can see it kept my UV, and yeah, that looks pretty good. So I select which edge is it? Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see. Okay, it's here, that one, right? So I can do the same, cut the edge and unfold in layout. And there is now one important thing that you have to take care of, which is a little bit the layout of all of that stuff. And what I choosing here is the island pre-rotation. So I try to lay out all my UVs in a horizontal or vertical level. It doesn't really matter to me, but it is, my opinion, better to work with if they are in a 90-degree angle to the UV space, no matter which direction. But what I don't like if that would be crossing the UV space, because then you get these little stare effects sometimes on the borders, and it could be that you see them in the rendering on the light map later. So it's better to have them straight facing in one or the other direction. And then also important, maybe not here at that point, but I could take care of that already, or explain it to you already, is the island padding and the tile padding. What we need later is a little bit space around the UV islands for what we call an edge dilation, which means that later we will render a light map that is a little bit 1 or 2 pixels overshooting that island, so you don't run into issues at these areas, for example, where you would have then only 1 pixel that is exactly on the border, and in the rendering you are not sure if or you would actually see that pixel filled in the area, maybe of filling out the area, and some others not, because it would be basically like a kind of stare effect you would see at the borders. So it is better to have a little bit padding in here. So simply layout that again, and you see it's getting a little bit smaller, but it also has a little bit space around it. Currently there's only one island, so it does not really matter, but later when I combine objects together and have multiple UV islands layouted here in that UV space, it is good if there is enough space in between these islands. So yeah, I choose a value of 0.02, that is working quite nice, and a horizontal layout for that. Yep, and then I keep going to the next object. So what do we have here? That's probably the mirror. Yeah, one of the easiest. So or is it the backside? I actually do not know. Yeah, okay. That's the class. While that object is, yeah, a wooden part. So let's work on that. It's basically repeating the same process over and over again. So delete these guys, do an unfold and layout, check where I can cut it. Did I cut outside or inside? I can't even remember. Inside, okay. Cut the edge, do an unfold, and move over to the next one. So yeah, let's take the class. The class is very easy. I separated that already. You can see it's a one or a single side facing object, so I can simply press unfold and layout and do not have to care. So another wooden part, and this is the back side of the mirror. You can see it's not a solid object anymore. We separated the class from it already. Do an unfold and layout, and now it really depends on how perfect you want to have your light map. So what you could do is here at the edges, right, to unfold that better and get more pixels for that area. I'm not sure if you would even see it at the end. You could simply make a cut in here, like this, say cut edges and unfold that again, and then you can see it unfolded a little bit nicer here, and you would get some more pixels in that area. Give that a name. Can be sometimes helpful if you do a naming while working on the parts. So another one. Let's do the same. Let's move it. And here we go. Unfold in the layout. Select the edge. You want to cut and do an unfold the layout again. And I think there's one wooden piece missing in here, right? Okay. So you can see that's the back side. There is probably nothing I can delete because everything could be visible at the end. So what I'm doing here is exactly that what I told you. So I copy my UVs because I can show you if I lay out them. So every surface is a planar island already. If I could copy them to my light map and do my process a little bit differently by sewing things together, right? So what we need is, so I want to have that and that and that connected, right? And then let's see how it looks like. All right, and then there is one surface missing or left. I can that attach to the rest of it. So right, so this is how you would split a solid object that it unfolds quite nicely and has no overlapping surfaces. So let's show what's that. Yeah. All right. Here. Yeah, maybe I can show you another technique on this. So first of all, I think that part is facing in that direction, and here is actually some stuff I could delete on a surface level. It will make my unfolding process a little bit easier, and due to the fact that we have access to the NURBS patches in VRED, it's quite easy to select them and to delete them, and even do an object like this, because this is now way easier to unfold. And I could do the same here. I could copy my UVs from the material UV to the Lightmap UV and do a layout. Okay. All right. And then I can select. That's interesting. Why did okay, there are some faces separated in here. So okay, then let's do the following. Because there's some issues in here in the geometry itself, so maybe a retessellation can fix that. Let's check. This time I don't want to preserve my UVs. I do tessellate. It looks a little bit better. Let's check the material. Okay, it says there are some triangles degenerated. So okay, maybe we can fix them afterwards. Let's see. So again, copy to Lightmap UVs, and then I would start working on a surface or an island level to sew things together. So I think that object, and that object, maybe those guys could fit nicely together. I will sew these island and let's see how it looks like. Yep, that's awesome. Okay, see, it also fixed these cuts in here. And then I think I can take that one and that one, and let's see how it looks like if I also sew them together. That's also nice. Not too nice, but it's okay in my opinion. And then I can take the rest of it and sew that together. Yep, that gives me that long stripe. And later when we combine things together, because I think I will combine multiple of these objects together that have the same material, because they are not moving, and I will combine them in one light map. It is better to have less objects for the light maps, so whenever you can combine things, combine them and calculate one light map for them, especially when they are not moving or don't have a different materials, because it is better to have less light maps with a higher resolution instead of having hundreds of thousands small objects and a single light map for them. So for the layout at the end, when I combine them together, it could make sense that I sew things together that somehow belong together, so I don't lose the connection. So what I could do, I could probably take that island, sew it, and unfold it again. So you see these two objects now are together, and maybe there's also an area here I could sew together. Doesn't look too nice, so maybe it wasn't a good idea. So let's cut that again and unfold it layout. So that's fine. All right. Then there's also that object here, a pin or whatever it is. As you can see, you don't see much of the geometry. So again, it is easier to delete these objects and leave only those guys and do an unfold and layout. And that is way easier than cutting that solid objects apart. So, right, then we have that object, also interesting. So we'll use the same technique, go to my material and copy it to the light map. And as you can see, when I do the unfold and layout, it will fix some certain stuff. Do a layout to it, and then see here's stuff that can be deleted as well. So this is really a tedious process. Oops, that was too much. But in my opinion, it is worth the time, because the Lightmaps will. What am I doing? Okay, sorry, I was in the wrong selection mode. So component. Now take this guy, and this guy, and the backside probably. Yeah. Let's see if that wasn't too much. Oh, seems to be fine. You can't see it anyway. And then again, on the patch level, I sew things together that belong together, or I could cut it. So not sure what is actually better. Let's try selecting the stuff. So those guys could fit nicely. This one as well. You can also use a box selection for it, right? So like this, much faster. Sew together, unfold and lay out the stuff. Nice, I think. Oh, we didn't catch everything. So here is some more islands. All right, and then I could basically move that guy away, take all of the rest. Hopefully it's more or less the outline. Sew together. And then all the outside should be one thing, and then find a something where you have to introduce a cut, because otherwise it will look a little bit strange like this, right? And yeah, I don't know, maybe here cut edges. Important is that it's unfolded yeah, nicely at the end. And do I want to connect that? I could probably here. Yeah. Not ideal. So let's simply undo that. I think it was fine as it was. Okay. Do we have here? It goes the same. I go on a surface level. Delete the stuff. Right. And do an unfold and layout. So I think from here you get the idea. I will now speed that up a little bit and go through all my objects and unfold them nicely. So, alright, that was a little bit a tedious process, but I think it is worth the effort you put in there. Deleting the stuff that you don't need, that is not really visible, and make some super nice, clean, smooth UVs for it, because at the end we will have hundreds of objects in that scene, and I think every triangle counts. And for the UVs, as much you can get out of the UV space pixel wise, as better it is at the end, because then you need can work with smaller texture sizes, because it's nice. The UVs are nicely fitted into the layout. All things are stitched together. This will help you later in the process or in the overall visualization to get some performance out of it and some really nice looking scenes. So the next optimization we do after we have generated all the UVs is merging objects together, because I don't know how many objects we have in here, some, I don't know, 50 or 100 objects in here, and I don't want to calculate a separate light map for each of these screws, right? So these are things I can combine together, and due to the fact the object is a static one, there are no animations planned for it, and it's not moving, I can really combine that by materials. So what I do now is I go in here and check the objects. I think they can be combined by material, which is probably all of the wooden frame, like this one, and probably even this one. Yup, that's super good. And I can do that by selecting them and pressing Control Shift M, and this will merge them, and then I can rename that into something clear, wood frame for example. And what we have to do now is a new layout for it, because all the UV islands we have created before are at the same position and are overlapping, and that's not working at all, so they need to be layouted next to each other. And I can do that simply by pressing the layout. And here again, the island padding is the important value in here, because we need some space in between these islands. So yeah, we'll proceed that. So the mirror class will have a different a separate material, so it needs to be like this. The back side also, it's not a black, it's more brownish, but I think here I can combine things together. So I will do that in the viewport, I think, going into the object mode and select these two guys and merge them together. And I could even also move the pins in here, so combining these two pins with it. And for the screws, I actually do not know if they are more aluminium or copper or steel or something like this. If I want to have a different material on them later, I could, I will give it the same metal material. So I can also move these screws in that object or in that cluster, right? And then again press Control M and do a layout. So I have the screws and everything in one map at the end. So what else do we have? Those guys here. Yeah, I think I will basically merge everything that is metal in one map. This one, so looks nice. This as well, and this as well, I think, right? So again, layout. Quite good. I could even, if they get the same material, I could even merge those both and then give it the name, in that case metal, right? Do a layout. So as you see now, they're sharing all the same layout. They are basically one object now, and I will generate only one light map for all of these objects. And you see I have reduced the number of nodes in my graph quite a lot, and I will proceed to continue that with all the other objects and merging them by material. So right, all the wood goes together, doing a new layout for them, and then I think all of the other things in here are metal, right? Merge them together and do a layout for all of these objects, and then those guys here, and I think I will even merge it further, so I could basically merge everything because it's all metal in here. Layout, right? And I could also merge them across the whole object. So yeah, makes sense to me. With the merging, you have to be a little bit careful if you later use something that some object culling, for example, to improve the performance, like here, the occlusion culling, for example, because you can cull only the bounding box of the object, so right, so it could save performance if you cull everything here on the backside in the rendering, so that one and that one, and if you're looking from here, then these objects are not taken in account. It could save performance at the very end in the whole scene. And if you would if you have smaller objects, of course, then there is more what you can cull at the end, right? And if this is one big single object, you could not cull it as soon as that part is visible. The other one could not be called if it's merged, right? But I don't think it will be an issue here for my object. And honestly, I think, do I plan any animations for it? No, I don't think so. So I will merge everything that is wood. So those guys, and then everything that is metal, and of course those guys have to stay here. And to move them out of the folder here, I have to use my optimize module for it, and then say flash transformation. I don't know what it's on, is it scale or translation, and do an optimize on it. Alright, so the transformation is gone, and then I can remove those guys, call this wood, call this metal, backside of the mirror. Okay, that's totally fine. Yo, that was my optimization for it. And I think the next step is assigning some materials before we start the baking. So I'm looking into my scene if I have some materials that fit already, and I think I take the black wood also on here. And what was the other one? A metal, right? So I'm checking for a metal. I also I'm a big fan of bringing structure into my scenes, so that's why I also made a group for all of the objects that are in the sleeping room, and I did something similar for the materials. So here are all the materials I'm using in that sleeping room, and there's an aluminium in here, so I can simply take that and move it to my metal and the backside of the wood. I think there's also something in here already that I was using for the backside. Actually not. Interesting. But I planned to do something like this. Okay, interesting. I forgot that on that object. Maybe on the other one. No, also not. Interesting. Okay, for the backside I wanted to use something like this. Yeah. So for the second, I set my camera back to default values. All right, yeah, that was a kind of brownish wood, etc. Okay, and now what? The mirror is missing. Okay, therefore I create a new chrome material or mirror material, and I explain you why I create a new one. I take chrome, which is highly reflected, I rename that to mirror class. And it's fully reflective, and it goes here. So, right. So currently we see the environment from outside mirroring in that one, but I will explain you later how you can get a custom reflection texture to it. So and the next thing we want to adjust is the direction or the layout of my wood. So, so right, everything that is wood. See, that's a good point. I have to do a layout for everything I have combined. So there's enough space. Backside is fine, and that guy was fine as well. So yep. And here for my wood, I can, now that it's nicely unwrapped already, I can simply copy them from the light map to my material, right? And then I do where is it? Manipulate and apply wood scale to it. Right? And if I show you the texture I'm using here, now you can see that it's repeating. That's actually a substance material. It is repeating, but my UV has now a world UV scale. And for my material, I also in the texture settings, I'm using a UV mapping type. Yep, and then I can control the repeat. So basically all objects that are wood in my scene have that world scale applied, and then I can control, because then I can make sure that all the UVs are from different objects are exactly the same size, and I can control it on a more global level on how the tiling should be for the object. So they're also facing in the right direction, otherwise I would have the option to select individual islands, or oh, what's this? There is a tiny little piece here. I'm curious what it is. So you can make a flight too. Funny. I didn't know that. What is it? So, yeah, I have no idea what it is. Something inside the wood. Happened probably by accident. So yeah, simply removing it. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. That's enough preparation work. Ah yeah, okay, that's where we stopped. So on the wood. Otherwise, I could select individual islands or all of them, and then rotate them, for example, 90 degrees, or however I'd like to have it, and I can do that also on an individual island level. Alrighty, and I think I'm now set up for baking my light. So let's quickly change the camera back. And it's also a good point to save now. Okay, so light baking. I select my whole mirror, and then I can go to bake light and shadow, and what we want to do is actually a texture bake. I have some settings stored in here already called AC interior. Let's go through that together. Something I want to change is I can use my CPU or my GPUs, and due to the fact I have two RTX 6000s in my machine, they are pretty fast in calculating the shadow, so I choose them, obviously. Then I'm baking light and shadow in here because I want to have all the indirections from the environment in here. Quality ultra high. For first test I go with medium. Then I want to have the indirect illumination, obviously, because the light is outside and I need the bounces. Remember, I'm using photon mapping, right? What we have seen, the distribution of the photons, that will be used for my baking. Of course, I want to have color bleeding, so from the, yeah, let's say brownish floor and roof, I want to have that light bounce back in a different color. share Lightmaps for clone. I don't have any clones in here, so I don't care. I want to use the denoiser. So here is the option that we have seen before in the render settings for the offline rendering or the real-time rendering, but for the baking that's separate in here. So no matter what you have chosen here, this option counts. Use existing resolution. We don't have any resolution yet because we don't have calculated light maps yet. So it is possible to work with a texel density in here or with a static. So if I would choose static and type in here something like each object or each object in here, or will get that 265 pixel resolution. That's nothing I want. I want to have it in relation to the size of my object. So the metal pods then are obvious getting a smaller light map than the whole mirror, where I need more pixel because it's simply a bigger object. So I want to have a homogeneous distributed light map. So I choose dynamic, and the most important value in here is the texel density. So 1000 would mean, as it says here, pixel per meter. 1000 would mean I get 1 pixel per millimeter. So if you would have a plane that is 1 by 1 meter and you have a perfect layout that is filling out the maximum UV space, and you would calculate that with that value, you can assume that the light map at the end will have 1000 by 1000 pixels, which is probably too much for my scene. If you have small objects like a light or some tiny objects, you probably need that. If you go close to them, there is 1 pixel for 1 millimeter is nothing. While for my flat, or if you have a football stadium, that is way too much. And this is a little bit playing in what you are happy with. So usually a value of 200 or 500 is totally fine. No? Keep in mind, as bigger the value is here, as bigger the texture will become, and as longer you will take for the baking, right? And also memory consumption is a point. As more light maps you have and as bigger they are, as bigger your scene is. And you can see my scene currently is using nearly 10 gigabyte in the video memory RAM. And you have to be a little bit careful depending on how many objects you have here. That's why I also that's why I'm also combining objects together to have less as possible light maps to make it looking nice. So, and then you can also work with the minimum and maximum resolution to crop that, right? Imagine you would have a value of 1000 pixel per millimeter and have a football stadium, and the maximum value would be infinite. Then that light map will become, I don't know, 100 meter by 100 meter at the end. So I don't know what that means in pixels, but so it is possible to crop that at a certain point. So minimum I want to create, so I will probably not create these tiny light maps with that big, but I have other objects in my scene where the minimum is 64 pixels. If it's smaller, then it really depends what it is, a screw, also if it's even worth to calculate a light map for it. And the maximum resolution for my light maps is 2084 pixels. So I do that. I start with a medium, but I can also do a preview quality on it just to check, or make a low quality, just to check that there are no errors in my UVs, also that there's no overlapping stuff. It's better to test that quickly and then do a longer bake on it. So I select the object and then I say calculate all. So you can see the scene is now sent to the GPUs. That takes a while, especially when you do it the first time. So once that scene is sent and I do a rebake, that process of initializing the scene and sending it over to the graphic cards will be much faster. But the initial step usually takes a while, depending on how big your scene is, or and it's sending the whole scene, not just that mirror, because you need the relation to the surrounding geometry. So here you can see that's quite fast, right? 4 light maps, 4 objects. GPU is running super fast through it. Boom. And if we haven't done anything wrong in our setup, then the mirror should fit nicely into that environment. Of course, the surrounding geometry has to be calculated as well, and also we need a different texture for our mirror. We also have to see if we need a light map for our reflecting mirror at all. Usually fully reflecting objects do not have shadow, but I think it's quite nice. Let's double check that in the pre-computed illumination rendering. That's okay, that's an issue. I think that is caused by another settings in the render settings. Oh no, I used the clamping. It's turned on. Yeah, then there are probably not enough samples to get something decent out of here. So what you see here is a photon that basically thanks. Yeah, okay. And yeah, here we have to then check at the end result if something I forgot to double check is that all vertices, yeah, no, they are. And then let's see if that mirror turns out with a better quality, but and also check if the UV, the light map UV, looks nice. It actually does. So, and here you can also in the light map, if you enable the texture, you can see how big that texture is, and you see there is not much, honestly. So it might be that my value of 500 is too small. But let's do before I decide that and before I calculate everything else. It looks good. And at this time I'm choosing the ultra high quality. You have seen it's super fast doing it. And I bake that with my final settings of 2000 samples. So that distribution process to the graphic cards is, now that I'm doing it the second time, actually a little bit faster than the first time. That looks much better, right? So of course you could argue, yeah, with a bigger texture here, especially for the screws and the pins and the metal part in here, you could have a bigger texture, but overall I'm not even sure if you will see it later in the realistic rendering, right? You don't see anything of these issues. Okay, and what is now missing is a part of my environments, or part of the surrounding geometry has to be recalculated at all. To make sure that I get the correct result in here, I could simply bake everything again. Don't think that is necessary. In that case, I select my floor, definitely. My walls are affected by that. Maybe the roof, I don't know, and maybe that guy here. What is definitely affected is that one, and I think that's it. Not even sure if the roof gets any effect. So I simply select these objects and then I rebake them as well with the same settings. So now that the baking is done, let's quickly check the result in the pre-computed illumination rendering. And I think the shadow that light is causing on the wall and on the floor looks quite nice, especially in the realistic rendering. So I'm quite happy with the result, and what is missing now is the right reflection for the mirror. So let's save that. And I will show you how you can create your own custom reflection probes. So what I'm usually doing is creating a camera where I want to have that reflection probe from. Here, for example, I did some already. If I enable the cameras, you can see there's a camera placed here. And with that camera, I have created, let's quickly select the camera and let's check the settings. So it's that one, and with that camera you can set the projection mode to a spherical map and render out a latitude longitude image or spherical map that you can use as a local IBL and reflection texture. And that camera that is here in the center, I'm using it here, for example, for that for the bed, and the HDR that was created with that camera looks actually right like this from that point. Very similar to an HDR from an exterior, but it's used here, or it's created in the interior and used on certain materials. So what I can do, or the way how I create it, I simply can duplicate that camera, call it mirror, and the camera itself is also mirror. And then I move the camera to where my mirror is actually. That's a little bit easier from a top view, right? And I move it right in front of my mirror, somewhere here maybe. And maybe also somewhere in the center of my mirror, which is, it's not so easy to identify where that is from, maybe from that side. Ah yeah, right. It's a little bit easier, so I moved that somewhere down here. I think that's quite nice. Yep, so if I would enable my wireframe, it is probably right in the center. Or maybe even a little bit lower. I can also do an isolate view on it. Right, and maybe also the camera could make fit. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. I have actually moved the camera, but let's undo that quickly. I want to move the group. The camera should not have any transformations. So again, this is the environment, so it's a little bit easier for me to see what it does. And we need this and this. Do an isolate view, and now move the camera in the top view to the right position. Thankfully here in the wireframe I can see pretty good where the center is, and also in the side view I move my camera downwards to the center of the mirror somewhere here. Right, that's fine. Live with all these values. Nice. Yep. And I could also in the top view change the orientation of my camera facing in this direction. Alright, so that camera is now looking through my mirror, yep, right from the center. And okay, now I can use that camera, and just for testing we can enable that camera. Maybe I have to change the transformation a little bit, maybe not, but I can jump into that camera and activate my ray tracing. Because what I want to show you, or the spherical map is working only in ray tracing. It's not an OpenGL. And what we do now is that we create an HDR image that is a latitude-longitude image from exactly that perspective. Right, so okay, here are all the other cameras. Can disable them, and then to make it a little bit easier, I create a new render window, and in that second window I enable my perspective camera, go into the top view, and could change the position of the camera. So my top view is wireframe enabled, and I move the camera a little bit like this and like this. So actually now, yeah, I'm looking through the camera and I get an image, so I can close that render window again. Okay, let's quickly check the values. Right. So unfortunately this is not working in GPU ray tracing. There's a bug that is hopefully fixed in one of the next releases. But this latitude, longitude I want to render, and there is one important thing in the render settings. I want to disable the clamping, so I get the full intensity of the HDR, and I will also switch to my CPU ray tracer. As I said, it's currently a bug. And then I set that, well, I'm writing that as a HDR, and reflections, how I call it, with an image size that is 2 by 1, so 1920 by 960, and check how many samples we want to render. Oh, that's fine too. and then press render. So now that the environment is rendered, the only thing we have to do is to assign it to our mirror material. So let's jump back into the perspective camera, and the way I'm doing it, I'm simply duplicating one of these environment materials. I'm not creating a new material to avoid the creation of an environment switch. So simply go there and take one of those and rename it to mirror reflection and exchange the texture with the ones we have just created. Right, so this is our new HDR. So then we go into our mirror material we've created and go into the comment tab, and in here with the right click you can choose which environment you want to have. It's kind of override environment, and we take that one, right, and this is the reflection we get. Of course it would maybe we have to let's see. I think the orientation is correct at that point. So of course this is a fake, a real fake to get something in here, and it would be more correct if you go into real ray tracing. So for example, let's choose pre-computed illumination here and then turn on the GPU ray tracer. So right, this is how it should look like with real reflections or ray traced reflections, right? And you can see that's reflecting, but it's seeing the white wall here, the door, and here the window, and this is how it looks in OpenGL. Completely different, but at least there is something happening. And a screen space reflection would also not work, as there are objects reflecting that are actually behind me. So that's at least a kind of nice fake. On other objects it might work better, like those guys here, right? They are reflecting the windows on the opposite side, and they are created with exactly the same technique. And also for that object here, it works quite better with some curved surfaces than here on the planar mirror. Of course we can then now still play a little bit with the values in here, with the orientation, with the rotation. So for example, and the height is not correct, so let's quickly check on which height I have set my camera. It's that value. I copy over that into my HDR. Didn't make too much of a change in here, but yeah, you can play with the values of the reflection texture, and also with the rotation in all directions. So really depends now on what you want to have. So basically that's it from my side. So I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you want to see some more of these kind of videos, leave something in the comment, a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you, cheers.